heart and it says, oh Lord, I love you. I am blessed when I think of your goodness to me. It comforts me daily, but there are times in my life when things don't work out right, and my burdens are heavy, and there's no joy in sight. Put my eyes back on you, for you've always come through, and with this simple refrain, I will bless you, 'cause you've been to me. Whoa. The way I could not see. Your love came in, lifted me. I won't come through, yeah. Oh. To dry my tears. There is not a closer friend than you. Oh Lord, you have been so good to me, more than this world could ever be. Really wanna thank you, yeah. Lord, I won't complain. Lift my hands, give you praise in the midst of each storm. 'Cause you are worthy. When life shadows and heartaches rush in,
I will remember.
Let the words of my mouth leave no room for doubt, because
Down through the years you've been faithful.
and when I think it all through, oh Lord, it's been you who's been there all the time, and I'm
Grateful, grateful.
Lord, you've been good to me.
Could not see,
Lifted me,
and I won't complain. Through the years, without tears,
there is none
a closer friend than you.
Lord, I
Know that you know what's best for me, even when I'm weary, eyes can't see.
wanna thank you.
Yeah, Lord, I won't complain.
Let the words of my mouth leave no room for doubt, 'cause down through the years, when I think it all through, oh Lord, it's been you who was there all the time. Through it all, you've been there for me, yeah. Through every trial, every heartache, you've been there. Every tear that I cried, Lord, you've been there. I lift my hand and give you praise. Down through the years, every step that I had to take, you've been there every time I've fallen. And you've been there to hold me tight through the crazy time. Give you the praise. You've been good when I think of all you've done. Makes me wanna shout for joy and give you glory. There is no one like you. You've been so good, yeah. Somebody say it. Somebody say it. I won't complain. I'm gonna say yes. Thank you.
Greetings, 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 greetings. I am King Clifford Jefferson, descendant of Godfrey the fifth Count of Anjou, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I'm the reincarnation, the personification or the incorporation of our founder, King Edgar the Peaceful, also known as Jesus Christ or the Vicar of Christ or Melchizedek, the King of Righteousness. It is January the 22nd, 2026, which is equivalent to the birth year 2976. I greet you in the name of my queen, Sister Galveston, from the House of Galveston. I greet you in the name of all officers, staff, member, etc. I greet you in the name of the spirit of our ancestors who have came and gone before us. I greet you in the name of you. Welcome to part one. What remains of the system when it collapsed? Part one. This is inclusively and exclusively for all you heirs of the church. Inheritors who are inherited the estates that were a part of your birthright as being part of the church. From a historical novelty, or what we call in the court of law a broad narrative, in a broader sense of our understanding. Okay, we claim to have an inheritance claim from God. So that means that based upon divine birthright inherited from God, here in the modern day, we claim that we're supposed to inherit an estate. A lot of us are wrong about that perception, okay, or about that assumption, okay, or about that fact, okay, or about that belief. None of these denote to the truth. So it's very important for you to watch this lesson with an open eye. I've been privileged to be under the spirit that has been laid down by our forefathers, all right, who has prepared the way for us here in the modern day, which is governed by not laws of God, but laws of man. These laws are called secular laws. Okay, you call them now separation of church and state. This is called the Establishment Clause. Okay, the origin of that Establishment Clause goes back to the Clarendon Constitution. Okay, or the Assize Courts. Okay, once again, they go back to the Clarendon Constitution that was overseen by the Assize Courts, who established the ecclesiastical laws, which are now called civil law. This is the process that now we must now take in regards to claiming or reclaiming our lost estate. So with that, let's get started with this marvelous lecture. Part one, what remains of the system when it collapsed? Part one, for potential inheritors. This lecture or this message or this schooling or lesson plan, whatever, how you perceive it, is in lieu of my book that I wrote. It's called What Remains. What Remains. As always, I'm going to show you a clip of the book. Let me show you. Be out soon. This is what the cover gonna look like. What remains? Y'all want me to give the preface? Okay, I'll read the preface to you. This is what's going to happen when the system collapses. We are going to inherit what remains. What remains? Order, change, and the discipline of continuity. Hold on, be plugging my computer. Okay, we got it. What remains? Order, change, and the discipline of continuity. Okay? Order, change, and the discipline of continuity. We really need to understand what that means. Okay? Why do I say that? We have to take a look at what we believe, what we assume, okay? What we deem is truth. Because they are not the same. Okay? They are not the same. So everyone need to examine themselves based upon them being in the system. Whether you participate or not, you're in the system. It's structured like that. The system is not like the system was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 400 years ago, 1,000 years ago. The system is not like that anymore. The system has evolved. We have evolved into the system. What was in the system no longer remains. What do remain is the system. Why? Order. Order. Order maintains the continuity of the system. Please understand how important this book is and this lecture. It's copyrighted, or soon to be. First edition. There will be other editions coming. What remains after the system collapses? In order to know what system, because there's the world is made up of systems, systems within systems. Okay? Very important. Preface. The premises of order when the order change. Okay? And when order change, that still doesn't collapse the system. The system remains functioning because of order. We know order means a process. We know a process means a procedure. We know a procedure means a policy. We know a policy means a rule. Okay? Order. Very important. Part 1. Preface the premises and reminder what remains if order turns into chaos. Okay? So in order for you to understand chaos, you must understand order. Because if you don't understand chaos, you will never understand order. Because order came from chaos. What came first? Clean or dirty? Everyone needs to ask themselves that question. What came first? Clean or dirty? That's based upon the assumption that you inherited in the system. Okay? Based upon an inherited understanding of the system, which is called the premises of order. This book begins with the simple observation versus participation. Okay? Once again, totally distinct. This book begins with a simple observation. Order is rarely questioned until it fails. In chapter 1, the premise of order is treated not as a moral good or a neutral container, but as an active force, one that shapes behavior, distributes risk, and defines what is considered reasonably long before anyone consciously agrees to it. Order is shown as something that does not merely organize life, but instructs it. It teaches people what is possible, what is dangerous, and what is not worth attempting. From that starting point, the work follows order as it encounters stress. Moments when inherited structures can no longer justify themselves. When obedience substitutes for legitimacy, and when stability begins to protect itself rather than those it governs. The early chapters examines how systems preserve themselves through habit, silence, and inertia, and how those same mechanisms become liabilities once conditions change. As the book progresses, change enters not as a disruption for its own sake, but as a corrective force. The middle chapters trace what happens after reform is announced, but before it is trusted. The lag between structural alteration and psychological permission. The difference between compliance and belief. The cost paid by those who act first, and the way resistance evolves once an open opposition becomes untenable. The work turns inward. It examines the subtler failures that follow success. Complacency, erosion, through convenience and the illusion that the arrival has been achieved. These chapters argue that the great danger to the lasting change is not backlash, but comfort and their systems collapse more often from neglect than from attack. In its final movement, the book shifts from change to continuity. It addresses responsibility without heroism, renewal without crisis, and succession without myth. Order is to be considered not as rigidity, but as a coherence, something that must be intelligible, revisable, and capable of surviving the absence of those who once insisted upon it. Chapter 21, the last chapter of the book. What remains does not close the argument by declaring success or failure. I'm sorry. Chapter 21, what remains does not close the argument by declaring success or failure. Instead, it names the residue left behind when the change has done its work. The capacity to choose again without losing identity. What remains is not a perfect system, but a discipline, one able to remember, to correct, and to endure without demanding silence or certainty. This book does not promise solutions that eliminate tensions. It argues that tension is unavoidable, and that the task of order is not to suppress it, but to manage it honestly. The work offered here is not a blueprint, but a lens, a way of seeing how systems fail, adapt, and sometimes mature. What follows is not a call to disrupt endlessly, nor to preserve blindly. It is an argument for conscious order that understands why it exists, who it serves, and what it must be willing to change in order to remain legitimate. Okay? So this is the premises of my book, soon to be coming. For you to understand the premises of order, you must understand its origin. Okay? Not based upon a belief, not based upon an assumption, not based upon a fact, but based upon the truth. The truth. I swear to tell the whole truth. Nothing but the truth. So help me God. Okay? Whether you're in church or whether you're in the courtroom, only the truth matters. So if that is in fact the case, let's define these terms. I forgot one. Belief. In lieu of the book. In lieu of the book. What remains? All right? The only thing that's going to remain based upon you understanding the premises of order. Throughout its changes, okay, because we know order means continuity, all right? It doesn't mean belief. It don't mean truth. It don't mean correctness. It means continuity. That's what order means, brothers and sisters. Okay, whether it's law and order or order without law, nonetheless it means continuity. We need order. So in order to have order, we must understand our beliefs. From a non-secular understanding to a secular understanding to make it applicable. All right, because it must be recognized in the system. Okay? It must be recognized in the system, but it can't be recognized in the system because there is a separation of church and belief. Y'all don't hear me. There's a separation of church and belief. Okay? Part self. Law and belief. Okay? That's how I should say it. There's a separation between law and belief. Narrowly understood. Broadly, it's understood as what we call God. How should I phrase this? All right. We know secular, separates of church and state. Okay. Law and belief, church and state. Okay. Law and belief, church and state. Those are the polarities. Okay. If you have the church, then it's God. Okay. If it's the church, then you're dealing with belief. Okay. If you have the church, it's dealing with belief. All right. If you have law, then you're dealing with what is it? Belief in the law. Okay. Church and state. We know that the state is governed by the law. We know that the church is governed by belief. All right? So in order for them to be applicable today, they must be uniform. This is where we lack our understanding. This needs to be cleared up. Because we have a preserved inheritance, all right, and what exists today. All right? But we have to understand it based upon how it was preserved in the system that functions today. Okay? Based upon our assumptions that we inherited. Let's look at this. Belief. Belief, a state or habit of mind in which trust or confidence is placed in some person or thing. And we'll look at that definition. I'm going to end this at 2 o'clock and come up with part 2. Belief, a state or habit of mind in which trust or confidence is placed in some person or thing. 2. Something that's accepted, considered to be true, or held as an opinion, something believed. Especially a tenet or a body of tenets held by a group. Okay? 3. Conviction of the truth of some statement or the reality of some being or phenomenon, especially when based on an examination of evidence. Okay? Based upon the examination of evidence. All right? We know evidence is presented in a court of law. Okay? Only way that can be considered if you have a record. Okay? A record. A record of the evidence that can only be brought before the court to give the court jurisdiction in the first place, and that can only be done by what? The parties in their legal capacity. Okay? You have a natural capacity and you have a corporate capacity. Okay? Those who are not corporations, you deal with the system in your natural capacity. Those who are part of corporations and are members of the corporations deal with the system or should deal with the system in their corporate capacity. All right? But that depends upon how you relate to the system. For them, it's a job. For some, it's a life. It's a way of life. Okay? Very important. Separation of church and state. A separation of belief and law. Okay? We must understand the polarities. Now we move to the next one, which will be fact. Because when we believe something, we take that belief to be a fact. Okay? We take that belief to be a fact. Okay? Webster's Dictionary. Fact, a noun. 1. Something that actually exists or occurs, an actual event, situation, etc. Okay? Often used in a phrase, the fact that. It's hard to accept the fact that she's gone. 2. Information or a piece of information presented as true or accurate. Okay? A piece of information or information presented as true or accurate. It's not saying it's true. Okay? It's just saying it's presented as truth. Okay? So until proven otherwise, it's a belief that whatever is presented as the truth is evidence can be proven wrong. Okay? And this is just the definition of the word fact. Okay? Let's continue. 3. The quality of being actual. Actuality. Okay? 4. A thing done such as what? A crime. B. Archaic action. C. Obsolete. A feat. Something to be done. Archaic. Performance or doing. So this is a, in terms of a definition, the word fact. Okay? We just define the word fact. And fact is something that actually exists or occurs, all right, often used to presume that something is in fact true. All right? That brings us to the next definition. Okay? What definition is that? Presumption. Everybody write these definitions down, please. Presumption. Presumption. A presumption is an inference the law requires when certain facts are present. Most presumptions are rebuttal, meaning that they can be overturned if the opposing evidence is strong enough. Others are conclusive and must be accepted as true even if contrary evidence exists. Ooh, now we're getting somewhere. Okay? Now we're moving somewhere based upon our belief in God and how that registers with the modern day systems that we subject to now. Okay? How does that belief play a part in the system? How can that belief be protected in the system based upon your actions in the system that relate to that belief? That, according to you, is a fact that is protected in law and at law based upon your capacity at law and in law. Okay? And majority of you, your capacity in law and at law is what? A natural person. Okay? Very important for you to comprehend what it is that I'm telling you about your presumption, about the system that you are a part of, whether you participate or not. Okay? You inherited this assumption, which is a legal presumption, which can be proven wrong versus what is said, other inclusive facts that must be accepted as true, even if contrary evidence exists. This brings me to the legal term, legal fiction. Because everyone, as members of the church, that being the Third Temple English Church of England, should not be acting in your natural capacity. Pardon self. Yeah, your natural capacity. We know you have a natural capacity, okay, which is free to do whatever you want to do, okay? But being members of God's church, in the modern sense, historically based, and must be in that capacity based upon the transfer of the estate that was historical in nature but applicable based upon it being secularized into modern day law. That is the connection that we all need to make. And it cannot be made in your natural capacity because that only relates to your belief based upon your assumption and what you believe is true, which is, according to your understanding, historically, a fact, but not a fact in law. Okay? For that, it needs to become a legal fiction. But in order to become a legal fiction, well, you have to accept the fact or the term fiction. Okay? Which means not real. The law recognizes it, so why not you? Okay? Then why not you? This is going to a whole nother level, my brothers and sisters. Okay? A lot of you who are inheritors or have the right to inherit based upon what we call the procedural process that their system inherited that was laid down by the administration procedural process that was established by the church, okay, before it became secularized, okay? We must understand this in order for you to be able to exist when this whole thing collapses. What remains? Okay? This is not spookism. Look at the world. Look at the state the world is in. They're not dealing with it. The ones who controlling the world, their system, and their natural capacity. Because if it was left up for them, they'd go home. But they're doing this in their legal capacity. Okay? The legal capacity is based upon the authority that they were allowed to have based upon the structure, okay, the framing of the system, okay, the order of the system, okay. So you're introduced into the system, okay. You're not taught about the system. You learn the system, okay. It's the difference between learning something and being taught something, okay. You're not being taught about the system, all right, about the truth of the system. You're only taught or taught, parts are not taught but introduced to the system based upon how the system functions. They can't outright tell you, oh well, the system is illegitimate. Nonetheless, it's a system, okay, and a legal fiction as well. All right, but is it accepted as the truth, or is it accepted as a fact? Because if it's accepted as a fact, the fact is not the truth. A fact is a belief, okay, called an assumption. In law, called a legal presumption. Okay? How do I know it? Listen to what Cornwell has to say. Legal fictions. Even though we know it's false, in law, it's accepted as the truth. Cannot be rebutted. Okay? And the capacity as a fiction, meaning not real. Y'all better listen. Meaning not real, but accepted as the truth. Okay? In law. Superior to inferior fact or belief. Because we just defined all three of them. We got one more. Truth. All right? Legal fiction. A legal fiction is an assumption. We know assumption is a fact. Okay? So a legal fiction, meaning something that's not real, but in the eyes of the law is legal. It's an assumption, which we know assumption is what? A fact. All right? And accepted as a fact, i.e. assumption, for legal purposes, even though it's fiction. Okay? I repeat, a legal fiction, majority of y'all won't be able to wrap your heads around that. A legal fiction is an assumption and acceptance, keyword, of something as a fact by the courts. Now we're talking about jurisdiction, okay? Jurisdiction to hear the matters as related to what? Not natural people, but fictions, okay? Whether you're a legal fiction or a legal presumption. That's for the courts to decide, okay? This is called what we call judicial review. And equity is called declaratory or injunctive relief. Okay? Determine what the law says and not what we assume or what we believe is the law. Okay? Because order has nothing to do with law, truth, justice, order, fiction, false, evil, wrong. The only thing order has to do with is continuity. All right? Continuity. The ability to be able to exist. So a legal fiction is an assumption and acceptance of something as a fact by a court. Now we're in the court of law. All right? Not the ecclesiastical court, not the canon court, because they have been secularized. All right? By who though? Who made this possible? Who made ecclesiastical or canon law, which is the law of God, all right, the law of spiritual beings, who made that law capable for a man to now have access to that? Now we're talking about angels, whether they're evil or good, right or wrong, all right, spiritual or demonic, all right. Nonetheless, you're talking about fictions, all right, which was governed under ecclesiastical or canon law, which you call God's law or spiritual law or religious law. Now that law has now become physical, okay, tangible, okay. These laws have been secularized. Legal fiction, because it said a legal fiction. Legal fiction deals with what? Civil law. Okay? Civil law. Law dealing with civil procedures. Okay? Civil process. Civil administration. Not just going out there taking the law into your own hands, but a formal de jure, as well as um, equitable, all right, remedial process. Legal too, but equitable as well. So legal fiction is an assumption, and we know what legal fiction and an assumption means. Okay? An acceptance of something as a fact by a court, although it may not be true. To allow a rule to operate or be applied in a manner that differs from the original purpose while leaving the letter of the law unchanged. I repeat, this is the first stepping stone that you all must get by to return to your real capacity to inherit the estate that was left from you from a legal fiction which I represent in the modern day. Okay? Legal fictions. A legal fiction is an assumption, an acceptance of something as a fact by a court, although it may not be true, to allow a rule to operate or be applied in a manner that differs from its original purpose, while leaving the letter of the law unchanged. Reasons for creating a legal fiction can vary but legal fictions are typically designed to achieve convenience, consistency, hear that word, continuity, equity, you hear that, or justice. Okay? Or justice. We must look at the language. Okay? The procedural language that was started by our Jesus Christ, King Edgar the Peaceful. He started this. Okay? He put this in place. Hence, the King of Peace. For example, where a court cannot exercise its presiding jurisdiction over a defendant, it can bring that defendant under its jurisdiction via quasi-rem subtype 2 jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, territorial jurisdiction, or venue jurisdiction. That gives the courts jurisdiction over parties. Okay? We must understand that based upon the parties' legal capacity, whether it's natural or corporate, nonetheless, the court has jurisdiction. Okay? Not the church, all right? Not the Pope, not the king, okay? Even though that's what I represent, but I understand it as a result of the change, okay? The change in the continuity of the system, okay? Based upon the order of the system, okay? And through observation, I realized that it's been managed improperly because the system, upon observation, is in the eyes of the authority or voice that existed, which was the premises of order, all right, says that the system is illegitimate. So it has to change. Okay? It has to change. Once again, for example, where a court cannot exercise its presiding jurisdiction over a defendant, it can bring the defendant under its jurisdiction via quasi-rem subtype 2 jurisdiction. The latter, subtype 2, is a form of personal jurisdiction, you as your natural person, that uses a defendant's property, i.e., pledge, voluntarily, by way of a interest deemed by your preserved interest based upon a preserved statute as deemed by the legislation. That will in fact be Title 46. Okay? It does not preserve your capacity in law, but it reserves your interest in law in regards to the property that you can inherit because of your capacity, which is based upon personal jurisdiction that they have, which is you and your natural person. And your natural person, you are a slave. The latter is a form of personal jurisdiction. When they got personal jurisdiction, they got subject matter jurisdiction. That uses a defendant's property to satisfy what? A claim against them. This is called an encumbrance. An encumbrance. It is the legal fiction because it threats the owners of property as a defendant, although the subject of a suit is technically the property itself. Once again, for example, where the court cannot exercise impersonal jurisdiction over a defendant, it can bring that defendant under its jurisdiction via quasi-rem subtype 2 jurisdiction. The latter is a form of personal jurisdiction that uses a defendant's property, and we know when we talk about a defendant, we're talking about the natural person, to satisfy a claim against them. It is a legal fiction because it treats the owner of the property as a defendant, although the subject matter in regards to the suit brought before the court is technically the property issue itself. Why? Because as a natural person, you are property. We must understand that. Another common legal fiction is legal personhood. Key word. Legal personhood. All right? Another common legal fiction is legal personhood or corporate personhood in business law, i.e., corporate law. We know the word corporate means body. And corporations of business require the creation of what? A legal fiction. And what a legal fiction? Something accepted in law as a fact, even though it is not true. Indeed, a truth. Indeed, true. Okay? All right, very important. So this brings upon legal fictions and legal presumptions, because legal presumption is accepted as a fact until proven wrong. Okay? Incorporation of business requires the creation of the legal fiction of corporate personhood so that the corporations could sue and be sued in court. This is called the capacity of a person. Once again, the capacity of a person. Very important that y'all write these things down. If you are to inherit your lost estate, vana vacatia, legal fiction. Now we go to truth. Who is telling you the truth? Are you being told the truth? Or are you being lied to? Because the opposite of a truth is a lie. Whether you believe it or not. Okay? And they just said legal fictions can be true, all right? Even though it's false. Okay? So we need to really understand what's going on. Truth and lies mix strangely. Okay? You can only tell its characteristics, its makeup, by its capacity. Okay? Legal capacity. The authority you have in that legal capacity, whether it's a corporation or a natural person, you still have a legal capacity. Okay? Very important. And the purpose of a court is to establish the truth. Right? So what is truth? The body of real things, events, and facts. Okay? Actuality. Once again, actuality. So we just don't want to believe something is true. We just don't want to assume something is true, because that in law is called a legal presumption until proven otherwise. Okay? Contrast to a legal fiction that they know, even though it's not true, is accepted as the truth, i.e., a fact in law. Okay? Which cannot be rebutted based upon what is legal capacity. Okay? Legal capacity as what? A legal fiction. Something that's not real. Okay? It has to fit into the process. It has to fit into the procedure. This is due personification, incorporation, whatever name you want to throw on it. This is how you legitimize, all right, your capacity based upon your belief that may go back historically to time immemorial. Okay? Very important you comprehend. Let's get it. So I'm about to come to my close. I got 15 minutes until we go to part 2. All right. Once again, I always have another video. Let's play that. And I'll play this first before I close out. So I'm going to let that marinate.
Imagine a world governed by rules that shape how we live, interact, and resolve disputes. These frameworks exist in every society, guiding conduct and ensuring order. But have you ever considered the fundamental bedrock upon which these rules are built, and how different foundations lead to vastly different legal systems? At its core, the distinction between secular law and religious law lies in their ultimate source of authority. Secular law originates from human reason, societal consensus, and governmental institutions, focusing on the public good and individual rights within a community. In contrast, religious law derives its authority from divine revelation, sacred texts, or the interpretations of religious leaders, often emphasizing moral and spiritual obligations. The why behind this difference is profound and crucial for understanding modern governance. Secular legal systems operate on the principle of popular sovereignty, meaning power ultimately resides with the people and is exercised through elected representatives. Laws are debated, passed, and amended through democratic processes, reflecting evolving societal values and practical needs. Religious law, however, is often considered immutable, as its principles are believed to be divinely ordained and therefore not subject to human revision, though interpretations may vary over time. Understanding this distinction helps us appreciate how societies function. In a secular system, the law applies universally to all citizens regardless of their personal beliefs, creating a common framework for justice and order. This means that government institutions, such as courts and legislatures, are independent of religious doctrines. Conversely, religious law typically applies primarily to adherents of a particular faith, and its enforcement may rely on ecclesiastical courts or communal spiritual pressures, rather than state power. A key concept here is the separation of church and state, which is a hallmark of many secular legal systems. This principle ensures that government decisions are not dictated by religious dogma, and that religious freedom is protected for all, including those with no religious belief. It allows for a pluralistic society where diverse viewpoints can coexist under a shared legal umbrella. Religious law, by its nature, often does not make this distinction, as it integrates spiritual and temporal governance. Ultimately, recognizing the separate origins and purposes of secular and religious law helps us navigate our interconnected world. Secular law aims to ensure fairness, protect human rights, and maintain social harmony for everyone through a system that is transparent, adaptable, and based on shared human values. It offers a framework for resolving conflicts and governing diverse populations without imposing specific theological beliefs, providing a robust foundation for inclusive societies.
If you're into this, like, subscribe, and drop a comment.
Okay. So there you have a video of the difference between church and state. Okay? The difference between church and state. All right? This is called secularism. Okay? This is called secularism. Okay? This is rooted in the Establishment Clause, which is rooted in the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, Articles of Confederation, all stemming from the Clarendon Constitution, from the assize courts. Because remember, in the English government, there was no separation of church and state. So the procedural process in church and state was actually segregated or severed or fractured, by those who were managing the system, okay? They were managing the system, not realizing that they were managing the system that they didn't realize the premises of, all right? The order, all right? Because the system, based upon the assumption that they inherited, was not the right assumption, because we understand that the origin and premises, as we understand it now, which is the reason why we incorporate it as a legal fiction, was based upon the authority of a non-voice versus upon the authority of a voice. Okay, the authority of a non-voice, i.e., a legal fiction, established why we have to understand our procedural belief in the system. Okay, and not what our assumption that we inherited are based upon the procedure that's now in place. Okay, these are all chapters in my book. Okay, let's see. These are all chapters in my book. Where is it at? Did I close out? Let me just show you. All chapters in my book. Got 5 minutes. Let me go to my table of content. We just talked about chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 of my book. All right? And chapter 4. All right? We just talked about 4 chapters in part 1 of today's lecture. Okay? Or today's schooling. Because you're in school right now, brothers and sisters. All right? You're in school. This is for those who are going to inherit what's left after the system's collapse. That's why it's called, the last chapter, part 21, is called what? What Remains. Okay? What Remains. The last chapter. We're in the 21st century, brothers and sisters. 21st century. What Remains. All right? Let's go to the first 4 chapters. table of content, the framing, the structure, okay? All right? The premises, all right? Table of content, preface, we read that. Part 1, chapter 1. The premises of order. That was based upon the assumption that we all inherited, okay? Which is not the truth. It's a belief, okay, that what you believed in is in fact a fact, okay? That's based upon the authority that came with a voice, based contrast to the authority that came without a voice. And only for you to understand that, you must understand the premises of order. That's King Edgar, because he put in place the procedural process that is our belief, okay? Secularized in modern day, which is based upon the architecture of truth or trust, okay, in the system, okay? We must grasp the understanding that I'm willing to share with you, okay? Just as I got it from my father, okay? All right, so that ends part 1. All right, this ends part 1. What remains of the system after the system collapses? Whether you participate in the system, whether you don't participate in the system, you're in the system, and you're going to suffer what happens when the system collapses. Why? Because you're not managing the system, okay? The system or the continuity of the system will still remain based upon the order, okay, of the process or the administration of how the system is functioning. And those who were introduced to the system, all right, they learned the system. They didn't weren't taught the system. They learned the system, okay, based upon the policies, procedures, the rules of the system, okay? They didn't ask no questions. Only for you to ask a question, then that means that you must be observing the system, whether you're participating or not. That denotes to observation. And you know when you observe something, that's a red flag. Okay? That's chapter 6. Early signals. All right? Early signals. That is chapter 6 of my book. See it right there. Early signals, the warning. Okay? When those signals come, that means that who's ever managing the system is not managing it correctly. Why? Because you're slipping from the procedural, architectural assumption in which the system is based upon. Okay? All right? You don't ask no questions, you just keep it running. Okay? Very important you to understand. This is 1 second for that thought. Okay. Sorry about that delay. So once again, you definitely want to get your hands on this book, What Remains, when it comes out. Okay? Because as you can see, the state of the world, we're headed that way. All right? But it's not because they're doing it, but that's how our state was preserved. We understand that. Back to the question I asked you all. What came first? Clean or dirty? Order or chaos? Right or wrong? And we all know the answer to that. Dirty. Chaos. Wrong. That came first. All right? Understand our position here. All right? As we turn ourselves to angels. We were born in dirt, brothers and sisters. Okay? From chaos comes order. Order don't come from chaos. I mean, pardon, chaos don't come from order. Okay? If that was in fact the case, we're in a world of trouble. So with that, I'm going to greet you as I always have greeted you. And that's in peace and love. Peace.